The rain hammered against the windshield of the black Mercedes as Marcus Whitfield adjusted his tie one final time. His phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat, displaying missed calls from his assistant. He ignored them. Today wasn't about business deals or board meetings. Today was about saying goodbye to his college roommate, James Sullivan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus had received the funeral notice late, a simple card with an address he'd hastily programmed into his GPS. After 15 years of minimal contact, guilt weighed heavily on his shoulders. James had reached out 6 months ago, wanting to reconnect, but Marcus had been too consumed with expanding his tech empire to make time for old friendships. The GPS announced his arrival at Meadowbrook Cemetery. Marcus parked between 2 older sedans and grabbed the single white rose he'd purchased. The small chapel ahead was modest, a stark contrast to the corporate world he inhabited daily. People in black moved quietly through the rain, their faces etched with genuine grief. Inside the chapel, Marcus scanned the room for familiar faces, but found none. Perhaps James had built an entirely new circle of friends over the years. The casket at the front was surrounded by flowers, and a large photograph displayed a man who looked nothing like the James Sullivan Marcus remembered. Confusion flickered across his face, but before he could process this discrepancy, a woman approached him. "Michael," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You came." The woman was in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun. Her black dress was elegant but not expensive, and her eyes held a depth of sorrow that struck Marcus unexpectedly. She threw her arms around him in a desperate embrace. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," she continued, her voice breaking. "David talked about you so much. He said you were the brother he never had." Marcus stood frozen, the woman's grief radiating through her trembling frame. The name wasn't James, and this clearly wasn't the funeral he intended to attend. But as he looked down at the woman's tear-stained face, something prevented him from correcting the mistake immediately. I'm sorry for your loss," he managed, his voice softer than usual. "Thank you for being here, Michael. It means everything." She pulled back slightly, studying his face. "You look different, more corporate. David said you'd done well for yourself in Chicago." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind racing. The woman guided him to a pew near the front, her hand never leaving his arm, as if drawing strength from his presence. An elderly woman sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Mom," the auburn-haired woman called softly, "Michael's here." The older woman turned, her face lighting up despite her grief. "Michael, oh sweetheart, David would be so happy you came. He missed you terribly." Marcus felt the weight of their misplaced gratitude settle on his shoulders. The elderly woman reached for his hands, her touch warm and maternal. "I'm Dorothy, David's mother, and this is Emma, his wife." She gestured to the woman beside him. "David talked about you boys and your adventures constantly, the way you looked out for each other in college." Emma nodded through her tears. "He said you were the reason he got through his engineering program, that you stayed up nights helping him study." The service began before Marcus could respond. A pastor spoke about David Chen, a 34-year-old civil engineer who had died suddenly of a heart attack while working late on a bridge renovation project. As details of David's life unfolded, Marcus learned he was supposedly Michael Torres, David's college roommate and best friend who had moved to Chicago for work. Emma leaned against him during the service, and Marcus found himself genuinely moved by the stories of David's kindness and dedication. David had volunteered at local schools, teaching kids about engineering. He'd designed playgrounds for underprivileged neighborhoods. He'd been saving money to take Emma on their dream honeymoon to Italy, a trip they'd postponed for 3 years due to financial constraints. After the service, people approached Marcus with fond memories of Michael and David's college days. He nodded and smiled, offering vague responses while guilt gnawed at him. These people genuinely loved their lost friend, and their love extended to someone they believed had been part of David's life. Outside the chapel, Emma walked beside him toward the cemetery section where David would be laid to rest. The rain had softened to a light drizzle, but the gray sky seemed to mirror everyone's mood. "I know you're busy," Emma said quietly, "but would you stay for a little while after? Mom's making dinner, and we'd love to hear more stories about David. I feel like there's so much about his college years I never knew. Marcus hesitated. The longer this continued, the more complicated it would become. But looking at Emma's hopeful expression, he couldn't bring himself to shatter her small comfort in this devastating moment. Of course, he heard him say. The burial service was brief but deeply emotional. Marcus watched as Emma placed a single red rose on the casket, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Dorothy held her daughter-in-law close, both women supporting each other through their shared loss. As the small group began to disperse, Marcus noticed a man in his 50s standing apart from the crowd. The man's expensive suit and calculating gaze seemed out of place among the grieving family and friends. When the man's eyes met Marcus's, there was a flash of recognition followed by confusion. "Emma," the man approached them, his voice carrying an authoritative tone. "I'm sorry for your loss. David was a good employee." Emma straightened, her demeanor shifting slightly. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss some matters regarding David's final project. Perhaps we could meet next week. Can't this wait?" Marcus found himself interjecting, surprised by his own protective instinct. Harrison's eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus more carefully. "And you are?" Emma answered before Marcus could respond. "David's best friend from college." "I see." Harrison's tone carried a subtle challenge. "Well, Emma, business doesn't stop for personal tragedy. The city is expecting the bridge inspection reports, and with David gone, he let the implications hang in the air." Emma's face paled, but David said the reports wouldn't be due for another month. "Plans change. I'll be in touch." Harrison walked away, leaving Emma visibly shaken. "What was that about?" Marcus asked. Emma shook her head, confusion evident in her eyes. "I don't know. David never mentioned any rush on his current project. He was always so careful about his timelines." Dorothy approached them, her face etched with concern. "Emma dear, who was that man?" "Mr. Harrison, David's supervisor at Morrison Engineering." Dorothy frowned. "That's odd. David mentioned his supervisor was named Patterson." A chill ran down Marcus's spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Emma's confusion deepened, and Marcus realized he'd stumbled into something far more complex than a case of mistaken identity. The funeral reception was held at Dorothy's modest home in a middle-class neighborhood. The house was filled with David's colleagues, neighbors, and friends from his volunteer work. Marcus listened to countless stories about David's generosity and integrity, each tale adding weight to his deception. In the kitchen, Marcus helped Emma arrange food while Dorothy entertained guests in the living room. The intimate setting made his lie feel even more personal and wrong. "David always said you were the smart one," Emma said, placing sandwiches on a platter. "He said you had this way of seeing problems from different angles, finding solutions others missed." Marcus focused on arranging napkins, avoiding eye contact. David was pretty brilliant himself. "He was, but he never believed it. He said you were the one who convinced him he could be an engineer. Without your encouragement, he would have dropped out freshman year." The weight of being credited with a life he'd never touched felt overwhelming. Marcus excused himself and stepped onto the back porch, needing air and space to think. The small backyard was David's handiwork, a vegetable garden, a handmade bench, and wind chimes that sang softly in the breeze. Everything spoke of a man who built things with his hands and heart. Emma joined him outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Are you okay? You seem different than I expected." Marcus's throat tightened. "It's just hard, seeing all this, knowing he's gone." "I keep expecting him to walk through that door," Emma admitted. "We were supposed to start trying for a baby next month. David was so excited about being a father." The raw pain in her voice cut through Marcus like a blade. This wasn't just grief, it was the destruction of dreams and plans, of a future that would never exist. "He would have been an amazing father," Marcus said, meaning it despite never having known David. Emma smiled through fresh tears. "He would have. He was already practicing dad jokes, terrible ones." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the evening light fade. Marcus found himself genuinely caring about this woman's pain, wanting to ease her suffering even though his presence was built on a lie. "Michael," Emma said softly, "I know this is a lot to ask, but could you stay in town for a few days? I have to deal with David's affairs, and I don't know much about his work projects. He always said you understood the technical stuff better than anyone. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Marcus knew he should confess everything and leave immediately. Instead, he heard himself agreeing to stay. Something about Emma's vulnerability and the mysterious circumstances surrounding David's work made him reluctant to abandon her to face whatever was coming alone. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus helped clean up. Dorothy pulled him aside as he prepared to go. "Michael, I can't thank you enough for being here. Emma's been trying to be strong for everyone else, but she's barely holding together. Having you here, it's like having a piece of David still with us." The old woman's words were like daggers to Marcus's conscience. He was deceiving people in their moment of greatest need, taking comfort meant for a dead man's real friend. But as he looked back at Emma, who was mechanically washing dishes while tears fell silently down her cheeks, Marcus realized he couldn't just walk away. Whatever had happened to David Chen, whatever game Harrison was playing, and whatever pain Emma was carrying, he was now entangled in all of it. Standing in the driveway beside his Mercedes, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would stay, at least long enough to understand what was really happening. He owed David that much, even if David would never know. As he drove to find a hotel, Marcus's phone buzzed with another call from his assistant. This time, he answered. "Marcus, thank God. The board meeting was moved tomorrow, and the Peterson contract needs... Cancel everything for the next week." "Cancel? But sir, the Peterson deal is worth $50 million. Handle it. I have something more important to deal with." Marcus ended the call and continued driving through the quiet streets. For the first time in years, business wasn't his priority. A dead man's grief-stricken widow and the mystery surrounding his death had become more important than any corporate deal. He didn't yet understand the forces he'd stumbled into, but Marcus Whitfield, temporarily Michael Torres, was about to discover that some mistakes lead to exactly where you need to be. The next morning, Marcus sat in his hotel room staring at a stack of documents Emma had given him. David's work files were meticulously organized, filled with technical drawings and inspection reports for the Riverside Bridge project. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't the engineering details he couldn't fully understand, but the inconsistencies in the timeline. According to David's notes, the bridge inspection wasn't due for completion until the end of the month. Yet Harrison had claimed the city was demanding immediate results. Marcus photographed several pages with his phone before heading to Emma's house. He found her in David's home office, surrounded by boxes and papers, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when he entered, managing a weak smile. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "David kept everything so organized, but I feel lost in all of this." Marcus noticed framed photos on the desk. David and Emma at their wedding, hiking trips, volunteer events. They looked genuinely happy, deeply in love. The contrast with his own empty penthouse and failed relationships struck him unexpectedly. "Let me help," he offered, settling into a chair beside her. "What exactly are you looking for?" "David's life insurance paperwork mostly, but also his work files. Mr. Harrison called this morning, insisting he needs all of David's project documents by tomorrow." "That seems fast." Emma's brow furrowed. "That's what I thought. David always said his company gave families time to grieve before handling business matters." Before Marcus could respond, the doorbell rang. Emma went to answer it, returning with a woman in her 40s wearing an expensive pantsuit and carrying a briefcase. "Emma, I'm Victoria Nash from Morrison Engineering's legal department," the woman announced, her tone professionally cold. "I'm here to collect David's company property." Marcus stood, his business instincts immediately on alert. "Don't you think this is a bit premature? David just died yesterday." Victoria's eyes swept over him dismissively. "And you are?" "Michael Torres, David's best friend." "I see. Well, Mr. Torres, this is standard procedure. All company materials must be returned immediately to prevent any complications." "What kind of complications?" Victoria's smile was sharp. Industrial espionage, data theft, corporate liability. You'd be surprised how quickly family members can make poor decisions with technical documents they don't understand. Emma's face flushed with anger. Are you suggesting I would steal from David's company? I'm simply following protocol, Mrs. Chen. If you cooperate, this will be quick and painless. Marcus stepped forward, his voice taking on the authority he wielded in boardrooms. Mrs. Chen needs time to process this request. Perhaps you could return next week with proper documentation. Victoria's expression hardened. I don't think you understand the situation, Mr. Torres. These documents contain sensitive infrastructure information. The company has legal grounds to retrieve them immediately. Then you should have no problem waiting for proper legal representation, Marcus countered. The tension in the room was palpable. Victoria studied Marcus with calculating eyes, as if trying to place him. Finally, she reached into her briefcase and produced a sheaf of papers. Very well. This is a formal notice requiring the return of all company property within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in legal action. After Victoria left, Emma sank into a chair, overwhelmed. I don't understand any of this. David never mentioned anything about sensitive documents or security issues. Marcus examined the legal notice. The language was aggressive, designed to intimidate rather than inform. His years of corporate experience told him something was very wrong. Emma, do you have David's laptop? Yes, but it's password protected. Did he ever mention any concerns about his work? Anything unusual happening at the company? Emma thought for a moment. Actually, yes. About 2 weeks ago, David seemed worried about something. He said there were discrepancies in some test results, but when I asked him about it, he just said he was probably overthinking things. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to form. What kind of discrepancies? Something about stress tests on the bridge materials. David said the numbers didn't match what the suppliers had claimed. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his assistant, Rebecca. Marcus, I need to ask you something, Rebecca said without preamble. Peterson Industries called. They want to know if you're related to someone named Michael Torres. Marcus's blood ran cold. What did you tell them? Nothing yet, but they seem to think you might be using an alias for some kind of industrial espionage. They're threatening to pull out of the deal. Marcus, what's going on? This isn't like you. Marcus ended the call, his mind racing. How his presence at the funeral connected to his business identity so quickly. Emma was watching him with concern. Is everything okay? Just business, he deflected, but internally alarms were blaring. Someone was investigating him, which meant someone knew he wasn't really Michael Torres. That afternoon, Emma needed to go to the bank to discuss David's accounts. Marcus offered to drive, partly to help and partly to think through the growing complications. As they walked to his Mercedes, Emma stopped short. "This is your car?" she asked, staring at the luxury vehicle. Marcus realized his mistake. A college friend working a regular job wouldn't drive a car worth most people's annual salary. I had a good year," he said lamely. Emma's expression grew puzzled. "David said you worked in IT support in Chicago." "I got promoted to management." The lie felt heavy on his tongue, but Emma seemed to accept it, though questions lingered in her eyes. At the bank, they met with David's account manager, a nervous young man named Peters who seemed unusually flustered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen, but there seems to be a problem with your husband's accounts." "What kind of problem?" Peters fidgeted with his papers. "Mr. Chen's checking account was frozen this morning by court order, something about an ongoing investigation." Emma grabbed Marcus's arm. "Investigation? Into what?" "I'm not authorized to discuss details, but there are questions about large deposits made into your husband's account over the past 3 months. Marcus felt Emma stiffen beside him. "That's impossible. David's salary was directly deposited twice a month. There were no other sources of income." Peters showed them a computer screen displaying David's account history. Marcus saw the problem immediately. 3 deposits of $25,000 each, all made in the weeks before David's death. "Where did this money come from?" Emma whispered, her face pale. The deposits were wire transfers from an offshore account, Peters explained. Federal investigators are trying to trace the source. Outside the bank, Emma was barely holding herself together. Michael, I don't understand any of this. David would never take money illegally. He was the most honest person I knew. Marcus believed her, which made the situation even more troubling. Someone had set David up, but why? And how did David's death connect to the mysterious money and the urgent demands for his work documents? Emma, I think David might have discovered something at work, something someone didn't want him to find. She looked at him with desperate hope. You think he was trying to expose corruption? It's possible. But if that's true, then you might be in danger too. As if summoned by his words, a black SUV pulled up beside them. Two men in suits got out, their movements professional and intimidating. Mrs. Chen, we're federal investigators. We need to speak with you about your husband's financial activities. Emma shrank against Marcus, fear evident in her eyes. The larger of the two men focused on Marcus with interest. And you are? Michael Torres, a family friend. The investigator's expression sharpened. Could I see some identification, Mr. Torres? Marcus's heart hammered as he realized he had no identification under that name. His wallet contained only Marcus Whitfield's cards and licenses. I don't have it with me, he said, hoping his voice sounded steady. That's interesting, because according to our records, Michael Torres died in a car accident in Phoenix 3 years ago. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma looked between Marcus and the investigators, confusion and dawning suspicion in her eyes. Who are you? She whispered. Marcus felt his carefully constructed lie crumbling around him. The federal agents stepped closer, their hands moving toward their jackets. Emma backed away from him, betrayal and fear warring in her expression. Ma'am, please step away from this individual. We have reason to believe he may be involved in your husband's illegal activities. That's not true, Marcus said desperately, but he could see Emma's trust dissolving. Then perhaps you could explain why you're using a dead man's identity to gain access to a federal investigation? The agent demanded. Marcus looked at Emma's shocked face and realized that his lie hadn't just been discovered. It had destroyed any chance of helping her or uncovering the truth about David's death. Worse, his presence had now made her a target of federal suspicion. As the agents moved to detain him, Marcus made a split-second decision. He grabbed Emma's hand and ran. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his office overlooking downtown Chicago, but his attention wasn't on the city skyline. On his desk sat an invitation printed on cream-colored paper, Emma Chen Morrison's wedding invitation. The surname change represented more than marriage. It symbolized her inheritance of David's legacy and the engineering firm they'd rebuilt together. The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Rebecca entered with a tablet displaying the latest quarterly reports. The Morrison Engineering Partnership exceeded all projections, she announced with satisfaction. Our sustainable infrastructure initiative is now the industry standard, and 3 more cities have signed contracts for smart bridge technology. Marcus smiled, remembering Emma's passionate presentation to his board 6 months ago. She'd walked into that conference room carrying David's original designs and her own vision for the future. Her proposal hadn't just been about business. It had been about honoring her husband's memory while building something meaningful. Marcus's assistant buzzed through the intercom. Mr. Whitfield, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. Send them in. Dorothy Chen entered the office, looking elegant in a navy dress. At 72, David's mother had become an official grandmother figure to half of Chicago's engineering community. Her foundation for supporting families of public servants had grown from Emma's insurance settlement into a multi-million-dollar organization. Hello, Marcus. I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. Not at all. Please sit down. Can I get you anything? Dorothy settled into the chair across from his desk, her eyes twinkling with the same warmth that had comforted him at David's funeral. I wanted to thank you personally for everything you've done for Emma and for David's memory. Emma did all the hard work. I just provided resources. Don't minimize your role. Dorothy's voice carried gentle authority. You could have walked away after the truth came out. Most people would have. Instead, you stayed and fought for justice when Emma was too overwhelmed to fight for herself. Marcus thought back to those early days after David's murder was solved. Emma had been destroyed by the revelation that people she trusted had killed her husband for money. The combination of grief, betrayal, and media attention had nearly broken her spirit. She deserved justice, Marcus said simply. Yes, she did. But you didn't owe it to her. You didn't owe David anything either. You stayed because of who you are, not because of what you'd gain. Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. Emma asked me to give you this. She said you'd understand what it meant. Marcus unwrapped the gift carefully. Inside was a framed photograph of the new Riverside Bridge, completed using David's original designs with Emma's safety improvements. At the bottom, in Emma's handwriting, were the words, "Built on truth and friendship. Thank you for helping me find both. E." She wanted you to have it before the wedding, Dorothy explained. She said it represents everything David believed in, that good people can build lasting things together. Marcus stared at the photograph, remembering the day the bridge had opened. Emma had insisted on a small ceremony honoring David's contribution. She'd spoken about her husband's vision of infrastructure that served communities rather than just corporate interests. Marcus had stood in the crowd, proud of what they'd accomplished, but acutely aware that he'd almost lost the chance to be part of it. "How is she handling everything?" Marcus asked. "The wedding, the business, all of it." Dorothy's face softened with maternal pride. She's happy, really, genuinely happy for the first time since David died. James is good for her, patient, kind, completely supportive of her career. And he genuinely loved David too, which matters to Emma. James Patterson was a widower and former colleague of David's who'd testified during Harrison's trial. His quiet strength and shared understanding of loss had gradually drawn Emma out of her protective shell. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on friendship and mutual respect rather than passion. It was exactly what Emma needed. "I'm glad," Marcus said, meaning it completely. "She deserves happiness." "You know," Dorothy said thoughtfully, "there was a time when I thought you and Emma might— well, that's water under the bridge now." Marcus had wondered about that possibility too. During the months they'd worked together to rebuild Morrison Engineering, there had been moments of connection that felt like more than professional partnership. But Emma's heart was still healing, and Marcus had learned to value their friendship too much to risk complicating it with romance. "I'm glad she needed someone who could understand her grief," Marcus said. "James knew David. I only knew the lie I was living. You knew enough to fight for the truth when it mattered." Dorothy's phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it and laughed. "Emma wants to know if you're planning to attend the wedding tomorrow. She says she's nervous about her presentation to the mayor next week and could use your input on her proposal." "Well, are you coming? I know Emma would love to see you there." Marcus hesitated. He'd been invited, of course, but attending felt complicated. Watching Emma marry someone else shouldn't hurt. Their relationship had never been romantic. But the prospect stirred emotions he wasn't ready to examine. "I have a conference call with investors tomorrow," he said finally. Dorothy's knowing look suggested she saw right through his excuse. "Marcus, Emma considers you family. David would have too, if he'd lived to know you. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born with." After Dorothy left, Marcus found himself thinking about family and choices. His biological family consisted of distant relatives he saw only at obligatory holiday gatherings. His social circle was largely professional contacts and casual acquaintances. Emma, Dorothy, and even James had become more important to him than people he'd known for decades. That evening, Marcus made an impulsive decision. He called his pilot and arranged for his private jet to be ready early the next morning. If Emma wanted him at her wedding, he'd be there. The ceremony was held at a small church overlooking Lake Michigan. Marcus arrived as guests were taking their seats, slipping into a pew near the back. The setting was intimate and elegant, filled with Emma's volunteer work colleagues, James's engineering friends, and Dorothy's extensive network of community activists. When Emma walked down the aisle, Marcus was struck by her radiance. She wore a simple but beautiful dress, her auburn hair styled in soft waves. But it was her expression that caught her attention. Pure joy mixed with peaceful contentment. This wasn't a woman settling for security or trying to replace what she'd lost. This was someone who'd found love again on her own terms. James Patterson waited at the altar with obvious emotion. He was a good man, steady, intelligent, and deeply in love with Emma. More importantly, he supported her ambitions without trying to diminish or control them. During the ceremony, Emma spoke her vows with characteristic directness. James, you've shown me that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. Loving you doesn't mean I love David less. It means my heart has room for both the past I treasure and the future we're building together. Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Emma had articulated something he'd been struggling to understand about his own feelings. His affection for her doesn't require romantic expression to be meaningful. Sometimes the deepest connections transcend conventional categories. At the reception, Emma found him during the cocktail hour. She looked stunning and happy, her face glowing with contentment. "You came," she said, embracing him warmly. "I wouldn't miss it. You look beautiful, Emma." "Thank you, and thank you for the wedding gift. The scholarship fund for engineering students was incredibly generous." "David Chen would have wanted to help other young engineers," Marcus said. "He would have, and he would have liked you, Marcus. Really liked you." James approached them, extending his hand to Marcus with genuine warmth. "Thank you for everything you've done for Emma and Morrison Engineering. David would be proud of what you've both built." "David's the one who deserves credit. I just helped implement his vision." "With significant improvements," Emma interjected. "The smart monitoring systems were your idea. So was the community partnership program." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the celebration. He danced with Dorothy, shared engineering jokes with James's colleagues, and listened to touching speeches about love, friendship, and new beginnings. During the father-daughter dance, Dorothy had requested a song for her late son. As the music played, she and Emma swayed together, tears flowing freely. The moment was heartbreaking and beautiful, an acknowledgement that joy and sorrow could coexist. Later, as the reception wound down, Emma pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "I need to tell you something," she said seriously. "When I first met you at David's funeral, I thought you were someone you weren't. But over these past months, I've gotten to know who you really are. And Marcus Whitfield is a much better man than Michael Torres ever could have been." "Emma, let me finish. You've become one of my dearest friends. You've honored David's memory better than some people who actually knew him. And you've helped me build something meaningful from the worst tragedy of my life." She paused, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want you to know that you'll always be family to me, always." Marcus hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected gift of her friendship. "Thank you for letting me be part of this, all of it." As the reception ended and guests began to leave, Marcus felt a sense of completion he hadn't expected. He'd come to David Chen's funeral by mistake, but that error had led him to exactly where he needed to be. Driving back to Chicago the next morning, Marcus reflected on the past year. His business was more successful than ever, but success now meant more than profit margins and market dominance. It meant using resources to create positive change. It meant choosing relationships over transactions. It meant building things that lasted beyond quarterly reports. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thank you for being there yesterday. James and I are honeymooning in Italy, David's dream trip. Seems right that we're finally taking it. Looking forward to working on the Portland project when we get back. Love, E." Marcus smiled, typing back, "Enjoy every moment. The Portland bridges will wait." As he reached the city limits, Marcus made another decision. He'd been considering a proposal from the mayor to head a new sustainable development initiative. The position would mean less money, but more meaningful work. For the first time in his career, that trade-off felt not just acceptable, but desirable. He thought about David Chen, a man he'd never met, but who changed his life completely. David's legacy lived on through Emma's work, Dorothy's foundation, the bridges he designed, and the communities he'd served. but it also lived on through the unexpected friendships forged in the wake of his death. Marcus had gone to the wrong funeral and found exactly what he didn't know he was looking for: a purpose beyond profit, relationships deeper than networking, and the understanding that sometimes the best things in life come from the mistakes that force us to become better than we ever planned to be. The Chicago skyline appeared ahead, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Marcus drove toward his future, carrying the gifts of an accidental friendship and the memory of a good man he'd helped honor. Some wrong turns, he'd learned, lead to exactly the right destination. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.